All right, so our last one is assortative mating. Um, this has been posited by many people as a reason, one of the reasons behind rising income inequality. This would be household income inequality. Not individual, this would be household income inequality. It's work by Tunkay that suggests that as much as one third of rising inequality can be explained by assortative mating. It's probably on the high end. But there's been work in sociology as well, kind of postulating this. I believe a UCLA sociologist, Robert Mayer, was like one of the first to identify this as a possible cause. Um, and so what is happening is people, especially those with those who are highly educated, they're increasingly marrying later. Um, and for high education households where it's dual earner, where both people are working, essentially what spouses are looking for is much more complementarity of leisure, okay, which is like fancy econ talk for they're looking for someone who shares the same interests that they can spend their time with. All right, both people are working. You think, one person's working, one person's staying home. It's like a division of labor, where one person takes care of the home, one works in the market. Increasingly, both people are working, and so you're kind of spending your leisure time to get both people are working and both people are contributing to the household in some way. And so what you're looking for is someone who matches you on your free time. At least this is what the theory goes. All right. And actually, we kind of do see that the matches, at least among high education individuals, are kind of better in terms of they're less likely to end in divorce than in the past. Um, so you kind of have increasingly like marrying like. And so you think about and also where people are meeting. So rising age of marriage, you're more likely to meet each other, at the workplace where you're doing a similar job, or in graduate school where you're again being trained for a similar job. So you increasingly have this like marrying like, a surgeon marrying a surgeon. Um, whatever, a PhD marrying another PhD. And so if we look at the household, that is going to just mechanically increase um, inequality. Whereas, a surgeon previously had married a housewife. Now, if the surgeon is marrying another surgeon or a pediatrician or something like that, then that is just mechanically going to increase income inequality. And now that a household that was making whatever 200 grand a year is making 400 grand a year, and we kind of see this that high income households have two earners, actually more than two earners on average per household. So husband, wife, or whatever, spouse, partner, and then maybe a teenager that's working or something like that, or someone else that's living there that's working part time or something like that. Whereas low income households on average have less than one earner per household. So if you look at that bottom 20%, there's less than one earner per household on average. So that means either nobody's working in households, or just one person is working. Whereas in the upper income households, the top 20%, you have two or more earners. So again, mechanically, if you just have more earners in one place, less earners in another place, that's going to cause income inequality to rise. Whereas you say you go back in the 50s and 60s, on average, there's one earner per household, across the income spectrum. All right. And so increasingly, here's the correlation between couples in terms of how similar they are in earnings, this red line. And so you can see, that is really increasing from 1966 up to the most recent data. This is by marriage cohort. Okay. Um, and then this is the kind of inequality. All right. And so you can see these are kind of tracking each other. Okay. All right. And so this like a sort of mating, just that both people are working and they're more likely to marry, someone who looks similar to them earnings wise. This is going to drive some of the inequality that we see. There are other explanations that are out there. There's a decrease in marginal tax rates that's often cited, where the top rates have gone down. I think it's a bit overstated as to the extent of people that actually paid those top marginal rates in the past. I think very few people actually were in those marginal tax brackets. There's like ways to get around that. Um, There's this other interesting theory that is maybe it's called the 80-20 rule. And you may be familiar with it. And the idea is that basically 20% of the people in an organization do 80% of the work, which maybe seems crazy to you, but if you've ever done a group project, maybe it doesn't seem crazy. You usually, in my experience, in a group project, 20% of the group does 80% of the work. And in organizations I've been at, it's somewhat true, where 20% are really doing most of the work. Not all the places I've worked. I mean, I was a beach lifeguard, so each person was responsible for their part of the beach. Everyone was keeping their water safe. But in other organizations I've worked at, it's close to true. Although in some places, not at all. Certainly with teaching, you can only teach one class, so it's not like 20% of the professors teach 80% of the classes or something. Anyway, it's just an idea. And essentially, the way this theory grows is that as technology increases, we're able to understand productivity much better. That firms are able to figure out who the most productive workers are, and then give them bonuses, give them extra raises, essentially reward them for their productivity. The 20% that's doing most of the work essentially are more rewarded than the rest, the 80% that's not doing as much of the work. Again, it's just a theory. I haven't seen any work on it. I think there was one paper on it. I don't have the site, sorry. And then there's like increasingly monopoly and monopsony power. Okay, what do we mean by this? So increasingly, there's a few firms that have monopoly power. I think the ones that are in everyone's mind are the tech giants. So like Google has a monopoly. Apple kind of has a monopoly. Facebook has a monopoly, or close to a monopoly. I'm using the term monopoly loosely, but they have a very, very high market share. I don't really actually think Amazon has that much of a monopoly. I think their monopoly power is overstated. So you increasingly have these companies, and there's more concentration. If you go market by market, there is more concentration. So this, monopoly power may be driving some inequality. This one is more important. What monopsony means is, just think about it like monopoly, but in the labor market. So, Amazon always gets criticized for paying their warehouse workers low wages. But where is that coming from? Well, where it's coming from is there's no jobs for low skilled workers. So if you don't have, if we just saw in the previous slides, if you don't have, those high skills, or you don't have that education, there's not many jobs for you. So essentially, Amazon can get away paying low wages because no one else wants to hire this group of people. And effectively, in some markets, they may have what you could think of as a monopoly in the labor market, which is called monopsony. And effectively, since nobody else these people don't have any other outside options, there's no other place, that wants to hire them. You can then give them a lower than market wage, essentially because you're not competing against anybody. Usually it's in a competitive marketplace, the wage, there's a competitive equilibrium. But when you're the only player in town, you can undercut it. And so if you think of some of that is going on in some small towns and in some markets where there's only one game in town for the low skilled workers, and then the firms are able to pay a lower wage because they basically have no other outside option. If you go work for an Amazon warehouse, the reason why the conditions can be what the conditions are is because you don't have any other options. Otherwise, why would you take the job? And so these things are also potentially contributing factors to that widening income inequality. Personally, I think this is important. Assortative mating, I think this is very important. I don't think unions are as important. I think they're important for meaning, but I don't think they're a primary driver. But again, that's not a gospel. There are people that would disagree with that. Globalization, I think, is less important than automation and this skill bias technological change. I think this is really a big one. The skill bias technological change and the assortative mating, that these kind of households are linking up, or people are linking up based on income. And then essentially there are working jobs where the returns to skill are higher and higher. And then we have kind of a hollowing out of the bottom of the distribution, where essentially there's no jobs for people with a high school diploma or less. That's my personal opinion. Again, the literature is immense and by no means conducive, but there's a lot of potential things that are going on. And it's kind of like looking at that, it's like, kind of unclear what a potential solution is, but we will delve into that in the next section.